My son was dying, and the doctors said only my liver could save him. My daughter-in-law leaned close and hissed, "It's your duty. You carried him into this world. Now you must keep him in it." I had already signed the consent papers, and the anesthesiologist was preparing the injection, when suddenly the doors of the operating room flew open. My 11-year-old granddaughter stormed inside, tears streaming down her face, clutching something in her hands. "Grandma," she cried, "you can't do this. I know the truth about why Dad is sick, and everyone needs to hear it." In that instant, the entire surgical team froze, scalpels hovering in midair, eyes darting between me and that trembling child who had just shattered the silence with a truth that could destroy everything. The white light above me was so blinding it felt like the sun had been trapped in that sterile ceiling. My body trembled against the straps holding me down, not from fear of the cold metal beneath me, but from a suffocating heaviness that pressed into my chest, as though destiny itself wanted to choke the breath from me. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor ticked like a cruel clock, each beep hammering in my ears, counting down the seconds of my fate. I could hear the sharp clink of surgical tools being laid out, the low rustle of papers, as Dr. Milton, an older man with silver glasses and a voice that usually calmed patients, flipped through my file one last time, and beyond the frosted glass, I saw her, my daughter-in-law Denise. She stood stiff, arms crossed, her gaze slicing through the glass like a knife. Her lips moved in quick whispers to her parents, but her eyes never wavered from me. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. "Do it. Don't you dare back out now. My name is Margaret, and I am 82 years old. My life has been nothing but sacrifice, woven together with long nights of exhaustion and mornings where I rose before dawn to sell baked bread at the market just to keep food on our table. I raised 2 boys on my own after my husband suffered a stroke that left him bedridden. My eldest, Samuel, was always the strong one, always full of energy and laughter. He became a truck driver, crossing states and bringing back little souvenirs for me, teeny magnets, postcards with sunsets, little things that made my weary heart lighter. But in the last 2 years, he had withered before my eyes. At first, it was stomach pains he brushed off. Then, weight loss, skin turning ashen, eyes sinking into hollows. And finally, blood tests that showed his liver was failing fast. The doctors told us bluntly, only a transplant could keep him alive. And out of everyone in our family, only mine matched. When the nurse held up the syringe of anesthesia, its glass vial gleaming under the light, I wanted to close my eyes and disappear. I whispered in my heart, "This is the right thing. I am his mother. I must do this." But beneath that mantra pulsed a strange unease I couldn't silence. It wasn't the fear of dying on an operating table. No, it was something heavier, like a shadow wrapping itself around my soul, warning me that something about this sacrifice wasn't as pure as it should be. And just as that weight threatened to crush me, the door burst open with a slam that echoed like thunder. There she was, my granddaughter Leah, only 11 years old, hair messy from running, sneakers muddy, chest heaving as she clutched an old recorder in her small trembling hands. Behind her, a nurse stumbled, breathless, trying to stop her. "Child, you can't be in here." But Leah's voice cut through the room like lightning. "Grandma, don't do it. I know why Dad is really sick." The scalpel in one surgeon's hand clattered to the floor. Even Dr. Milton froze mid-movement, his gloved hands lifted as if pausing time. Denise's shriek pierced through the glass. "Don't listen to her. She's just a child." But her eyes, usually cold and commanding, flickered with panic, the kind of panic that comes when secrets stand on the edge of exposure. And in that instant, my body went still. My throat was dry, unable to speak, but my heart screamed inside me. "What do you know, my child? What have they hidden from me all this time?" Leah's words hung in the room like a storm cloud about to break, every person frozen, every breath caught in their throats. The heart monitor seemed louder now, its beeping no longer steady but frantic, echoing the thundering of my own pulse. I tried to lift my head, the straps digging into my shoulders, but all I could do was watch as that small, trembling girl clutched her recorder with white knuckles. Her cheeks were wet, her eyes wide with fear and determination, far too much for a child her age to carry. Behind the glass, Denise pounded her fists, her voice sharp and desperate. "She doesn't know what she's saying. Take her out of here." But her panic betrayed her, and I saw something crack in her composure, a glimpse of fear that only confirmed what my soul had been whispering for weeks. I wanted to call out to Leah, to tell her not to be afraid, that her grandmother was listening, but the dryness in my throat made it impossible. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, paralyzed on that cold table. Dr. Milton stepped forward, his voice stern yet calm. "Young lady, if you have something to say, say it now, but understand the seriousness of this moment." Leah nodded, her small chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. She lifted the recorder, pressing play, and the room filled with a voice that froze my blood. Denise's voice. "Once the transplant is done, everything will be in place. Don't worry. She'll never say no. She's too weak, too afraid." The words hissed through the tiny speakers like venom, and a silence followed so heavy it seemed the walls themselves were listening. Memories crashed into me like waves. I thought of the nights when I had first noticed Denise whispering into her phone in the kitchen, her back turned, her words low and hurried. I had asked once who she was speaking to so late. She laughed, brushing me off with that fake sweetness of hers. "Just my cousin, Mama Margaret. You worry too much." I had wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe she loved Samuel, that she was doing everything for his sake. She was, after all, his wife, the mother of my grandchildren. But there had been moments small, fleeting where her gaze would harden, her voice turn sharp, and I felt like I was standing in front of a stranger wearing a mask. Now, listening to her own voice, confessing manipulation, I felt as though the floor beneath me had split open. Samuel, my son, my firstborn, lay in a room next door, frail and clinging to life, and I was seconds away from cutting myself open to save him. Yet why did it feel like I was stepping into a trap, laid out carefully, piece by piece, by the very woman who claimed to love him? Leah's little hands shook as she held the recorder, but her voice was steady. "Grandma, Dad isn't sick because of work or stress. Mom's been giving him medicine that makes him worse." I heard her say it. I heard her with my own ears. The room erupted. Nurses gasped, one of them dropping a tray of instruments that scattered across the floor with a crash. Dr. Milton's brows knitted together, his lips pressed thin. He looked at me, then at Leah, then back toward the glass where Denise stood, her face drained of color. "This is absurd," she screamed, but her voice cracked. I could see her parents pulling her back, whispering furiously, their own faces pale with fear. And in that chaos, my mind was pulled back into the past, to the days before all of this madness consumed my family. I remembered my small house in Detroit, the one I had kept alive with sweat and willpower. Every morning, I woke before the sun, kneading dough, baking loaves, carrying baskets to the corner where I sold bread to neighbors rushing to work. My hands, gnarled and calloused now, were once strong from years of labor. I never complained. My husband, Walter, had been a carpenter until his stroke at 62 left him silent and half paralyzed, his once booming laugh reduced to faint sighs. I took care of him, fed him, washed him, and pushed his chair into the backyard so he could feel the wind, even if his eyes no longer followed the sky. Life had taken so much, but I never allowed it to take my dignity. My boys, Samuel and David, were my strength. Samuel, the older, with his broad shoulders and endless jokes, had chosen a life on the road, driving trucks through long highways, returning with stories of mountains and deserts, and strange diners he'd found along the way. David, 6 years younger, quiet and steady, worked as a school janitor. He wasn't loud or proud like his brother, but his heart was good, always bringing me little gifts. A new kettle when mine rusted, a warm blanket for winter nights. He never had much money, but what he had, he shared. And then there was Leah, my little granddaughter, who filled my lonely evenings with laughter and drawings she taped to my kitchen walls. It was all so ordinary, so fragile. And then Samuel fell sick. At first, we all thought it was exhaustion. Truck driving wore him down, the sleepless nights, the greasy food on the road. But his skin turned yellow, his strength drained, and then the hospital visits began. Denise was always there, clipboard in hand, managing his medicines, ordering us around as though she were the captain of a sinking ship. "He needs this pill," she would say firmly, handing him bottles without labels. The doctor approved it, and though my heart tensed, I bit my tongue. After all, she was his wife. Who was I to question her? Now, strapped to a surgical table, the truth lay before me like a dagger. Denise hadn't been saving my son. She had been poisoning him. And here I was, moments away from giving her exactly what she wanted: my body, my sacrifice, my life. The realization burned through me like fire in my veins. The room was still frozen in that stunned silence, but inside my mind, images flickered like lightning. Samuel laughing as a boy, his hands sticky with honey from the rolls I baked. Denise arriving at our door the first time, her hair perfectly pinned, her smile wide and charming. The unlabeled bottles she kept in a locked cabinet in their kitchen. And now Leah, my brave little Leah, standing in the middle of an operating room like a soldier on a battlefield, holding the truth out for all to see. My lips trembled, trying to form words, but my voice was only a rasp. "Leah, come here." She ran to me, the recorder clutched tightly against her chest, and the nurse who had tried to stop her now simply stepped aside, tears in her own eyes. Dr. Milton lowered his gloves and took a deep breath, his expression no longer clinical but heavy with something human, something protective. "Mrs. Harris," he said, his voice deliberate, "if what your granddaughter is saying is true, this operation cannot continue. I need to know exactly what is happening before I proceed." His words felt like a lifeline thrown into a sea where I was drowning. For the first time in weeks, someone was stopping the machine. Someone was asking questions instead of demanding my sacrifice. Denise banged on the glass again, her voice shrill and frantic. "This is ridiculous. She's confused. She's old, and the child doesn't understand anything." But even from across the room, I saw her hands shaking, her eyes darting, searching for an escape that wasn't there. I closed my eyes for a moment and the past came rushing in, not like a gentle memory, but like a flood breaking through a dam. I saw the winter mornings when I wrapped Samuel in a threadbare coat and sent him to school with a biscuit in his pocket because we couldn't afford lunch. I remembered the nights I scrubbed floors for a hotel after spending the day selling bread just to keep the lights on. I remembered Walter before the stroke, his big hands guiding Samuel as he built a toy truck out of scrap wood in our backyard. All of it, every sacrifice, every moment, had been to protect my family, to give them a chance at life. And now that life was being stolen, not by fate, but by deceit. I opened my eyes and looked at Leah. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set with the determination of someone far older than her years. "Grandma," she whispered, "I've heard her tonight. She calls someone and says things about tests and money. She puts powder in Dad's drinks and says you'll give your liver soon." I recorded it because I didn't know what else to do. Her small shoulders shook, but she didn't cry. She simply stood there, holding out the recorder like a piece of evidence in a trial. My heart ached for her. No child should have to be this brave. Dr. Milton turned to the other doctors and nurses. "We're halting the procedure," he said firmly. "I want security to escort Mrs. Harris's daughter-in-law and her parents out of the observation room immediately." The nurses exchanged glances, unsure, but his tone left no room for doubt. One of them stepped toward the door. Denise's scream of protest echoed down the hallway, muffled as the door closed behind her. I lay there, the straps still holding me, tears streaming into my hairline. Relief and terror tangled in my chest. Relief that someone had listened. Terror at what would happen next. Samuel was still lying in the next room, frail and fading, and I had no proof beyond a child's recording and my own suspicions. Could we stop this before it was too late? Would anyone believe us? The questions circled in my mind like vultures, but under them all was a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in months: hope. My thoughts drifted to David, my younger son, the one who had been quietly watching Denise with narrowed eyes for weeks. He had tried to warn me once. He had said, "Mom, something isn't right. Don't rush into surgery. Let me find out more." I had brushed him off, too tired, too overwhelmed, too consumed by Samuel's suffering to listen. But now I understood. David had seen the cracks. He had felt the same shadow I felt. I thought of the night last month when David had come by after work, his clothes still smelling faintly of cleaning solution from the school, and found me sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of medical forms. He had placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said softly, "You've given your whole life for this family. Don't let anyone push you into giving the rest." His words had slid off me then like water off stone, but now, lying on this table, hearing my granddaughter's recording, they came back with the weight of prophecy. Dr. Milton's voice brought me back. "Mrs. Harris, can you move your arms?" he asked. I tried. My hands trembled, but managed to lift an inch. "We're going to undo these straps," he said quietly. "You're not going to surgery today. Not until we know what's happening." The nurse's fingers were gentle as she unbuckled the leather restraints. The feeling of freedom, even in such a small movement, made my chest ache. I reached out a shaky hand toward Leah. She rushed to my side and gripped my fingers tightly, her small palm warm against my cold skin. And in that moment, as the door to the operating room opened, and 2 security guards appeared to escort Denise away, I made myself a promise. I would find the truth. I would protect my son, my granddaughter, and even myself. For the first time in months, I felt my spine straighten, my heart beat with purpose. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a fight I hadn't even known I was in. As they wheeled me out of the operating room, the fluorescent lights above me passed one by one, each glow cutting through my mind like a reminder of how close I had come to giving up my life without knowing the full truth. Leah walked beside the gurney, still clutching that little recorder, her chin held high as though she had just carried a secret, heavier than her small frame could bear. I wanted to hold her close, to whisper words of comfort into her ear, but my lips were dry, my body too weak from the sedatives already moving through my bloodstream. Yet inside, something fierce had awoken. For weeks I had been silent, letting Denise and her parents dictate every move, convincing myself that a mother's duty meant obedience, sacrifice, surrender. But as I stared at my granddaughter's determined eyes, I realized duty was not about surrender, it was about protection. Even if it meant protecting my son from the very person who claimed to love him most. The nurses placed me in a recovery room, dimly lit, away from the cold brightness of the surgical lamps. The smell of antiseptic lingered in the air, mingling with the faint aroma of stale coffee left on a counter nearby. My mind drifted, foggy, but I forced myself to stay awake. I had no time for rest. Samuel's life hung in the balance, and the woman meant to care for him was now under suspicion of causing his suffering. I turned my head to Leah, who sat on a chair too large for her small body, her feet not even touching the floor. She looked at me with wide, worried eyes, her fingers still locked around the recorder, as if letting it go would erase the truth. "Leah," I whispered, my voice breaking but steady, "you did something very brave today. But you must tell me everything. Don't hold back." She nodded quickly, her lips trembling, and leaned closer. Her words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking. "Grandma, I heard Mom at night. She talks on the phone when she thinks everyone's asleep. She says things about numbers and reports, about how after the transplant they'll get the results they need. I didn't understand everything, but I know she's been slipping powders and pills into Dad's food. I saw her do it. Once I asked her what it was, and she told me to stay quiet, that it was grown-up medicine. But I knew she was lying. Her little hands clenched into fists. That's why I recorded her. I was scared. I didn't know who else would believe me. Her words stabbed into my heart, deeper than any scalpel ever could. My Samuel, who had worked his whole life to provide, who had carried the weight of responsibility after his father's stroke, was lying in a hospital bed, wasting away not from fate, but from betrayal. And this betrayal came not from an enemy outside, but from the woman who shared his bed, who whispered promises of love, who convinced us all that she was his savior. I felt my chest tighten, a wave of anger so fierce it made my hands tremble. But beneath that anger was fear. If Denise was capable of poisoning her own husband, what else was she capable of? The door opened softly, and David stepped inside. His tall frame filled the doorway, his janitor's uniform wrinkled from work, the scent of cleaning chemicals clinging faintly to him. His eyes immediately found Leah, then me, and I saw the concern etched deep into his brow. "Mom," he said quietly, "I heard what happened. They're keeping Denise in another room under watch. But we don't have much time. Sam is getting worse." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I told you before something wasn't right. I found bottles in their house, bottles with no labels. She hides them behind cleaning supplies. I didn't know how to prove it, but Leah's recording changes everything." Tears welled in my eyes. "David," I whispered, "I should have listened. You saw it. You knew. I was blind because I wanted to believe she loved him." He shook his head, placing a steady hand on mine. "You're not blind, Mom. You're just good. You always see the best in people. That's why she thought she could fool you." His words were gentle, but each one struck deep. For years I had prided myself on strength, on seeing through life's hardships, yet here I was, tricked by a smile, by carefully chosen words. Leah climbed onto the bed beside me, her small body curling against mine. I wrapped an arm around her frail shoulders, feeling her warmth, her trembling. "We'll protect him," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "We'll protect Samuel, no matter what it takes." My mind began to race, piecing together fragments of memories, things I had dismissed before. Denise checking Samuel's food before anyone else could touch it. Her late-night phone calls where she used words like timing and data. Her parents arriving at my house with speeches about duty, pressing me to agree without question. And most chilling of all, Samuel's eyes whenever she gave him his pills, trusting, unaware, fading a little more each day. Dr. Milton returned, his silver glasses reflecting the dim light. He carried a file in his hands, his expression grave. "Mrs. Harris," he said, "I've been reviewing your son's test results. There are inconsistencies of strange fluctuations that don't align with natural liver failure. It's as though something external has been worsening his condition. I can't say for certain yet, but I've ordered a toxicology screen. If what your granddaughter says is true, we may have answers soon." His voice was calm but urgent, and my heart lurched at the thought. Proof, finally. Proof that Samuel's suffering wasn't some cruel twist of fate, but the result of deliberate cruelty. As Dr. Milton left, David looked at me, his jaw tight. "Mom, we have to be ready. If those tests confirm it, Denise won't just be dangerous, she'll be desperate. And desperate people do terrible things." His words chilled me. I thought of Denise's eyes, sharp and cold like broken glass, and I knew he was right. This battle was far from over. The night crept in slowly, pressing its weight against the hospital windows, dimming the hallways until only the buzzing fluorescent bulbs remained. I sat upright in the bed, too restless to lie down. Leah curled against my side, finally asleep after hours of whispering the same questions over and over. Will Daddy be okay? Will Mommy hurt him again? Her tiny body twitched with dreams, her fingers still wrapped around that recorder as though she feared someone would snatch it away in the dark. David had stepped out to get coffee, but before leaving he had looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Don't let anyone in here unless it's me or Dr. Milton. Promise me, Mom." His voice had carried a weight I had never heard before, a mix of fear and resolve. I promised, though my heart was pounding, because deep inside I knew he was right. Denise was not done. As the minutes dragged on, I stared at the clock ticking above the door, each sound echoing through the sterile room. My mind wandered back to Samuel, lying somewhere nearby, connected to tubes and wires, his once strong body now reduced to fragile bones and thin skin. I remembered his laughter when he was younger, the way he'd burst into the kitchen shouting, "Mama, smell the diesel on my hands. Smells like hard work." I used to scold him for tracking dirt inside, but secretly, I felt proud. He was a man who carried the world on his shoulders, just like his father once did. And now that man was fighting for his life, betrayed by the one person meant to stand by his side. A sound at the door pulled me from my thoughts. A shadow moved across the narrow glass window. My chest tightened. Slowly, the handle turned. My first instinct was to shield Leah, pulling her closer, though she stirred in her sleep. The door opened just a crack before a firm voice cut through the silence. "Mrs. Harris." It was Dr. Milton. Relief washed over me. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, his face solemn. He held a folder, and I knew before he spoke that it contained the truth we had been waiting for. "The toxicology results came back," he said quietly, glancing toward Leah to make sure she was still asleep. He moved closer to my bed, lowering his voice. "Your son has been receiving substances not prescribed by any doctor here. The compounds are consistent with certain toxins that, over time, would cause severe damage to his liver. This is no accident. Someone has been poisoning him." His words hit me like a hammer. Even though I already knew it in my bones, hearing it confirmed by science tore something inside me apart. I pressed a trembling hand to my chest, trying to steady my breath. Can he survive?" I asked, my voice no more than a whisper. Dr. Milton's gaze softened. "If we stop the exposure immediately and begin treatment, there's a chance. But the damage is advanced. A transplant may still be needed, but not under these circumstances. Not until we ensure he's safe." He paused, his jaw tightening. "We've notified the authorities. An investigation will begin tonight." My heart swelled with both relief and terror. Relief that the truth was finally undeniable. Terror at the thought of Denise learning that her secret had been exposed. I knew her too well. She wouldn't sit quietly while her plans unraveled. I looked at Leah, her innocent face pressed against my arm. And a surge of protectiveness rose in me so strong, I felt as though I could tear down the walls of the hospital if it meant keeping her safe. Before Dr. Milton could say more, the door rattled. A sharp knock, hurried and aggressive, made Leah jolt awake. She sat up, eyes wide, clutching the recorder to her chest. David burst in, his breath quick, his eyes scanning the room. "They let her out," he hissed. "Denise. She convinced her parents to make a scene, claiming you're delusional and Leah is just a child with an overactive imagination. They're trying to discredit everything before the police arrive." His fists clenched at his sides. "Mom, she's desperate. You need to be ready." My pulse quickened. The thought of Denise wandering these halls, her lies crumbling, her mask slipping, sent a chill crawling down my spine. For years I had been the rock of my family, silent, obedient, doing what was asked of me. But now, everything in me screamed that silence would kill us. I reached for Leah's hand and looked at David with all the strength left in me. "We're not hiding anymore," I said, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "If she wants to face me, then let her. But this time, she won't win." The hallway outside erupted with voices raised, furious, desperate. Denise's shrill cry cut through them all, demanding to see me, to see Samuel, insisting that we were all against her. I tightened my grip on Leah's hand, bracing myself. The storm had arrived, and there was no turning back. The shouting in the hallway grew louder, spilling into every corner of the hospital ward like a tide that could not be contained. Nurses tried to calm the storm, but Denise's voice tore through their words, shrill and furious, echoing off the sterile walls. "He is my husband. You cannot keep me from him. That old woman is lying, and that child is confused. Do you know who I am? Do you know what rights I have?" Her parents' voices joined in, lower but no less venomous, demanding to speak with administrators, threatening legal action, insisting that I was unstable and easily manipulated. I sat there on the hospital bed, holding Leah against me, feeling her small heart hammering against my side. The sound of their rage no longer frightened me the way it once had. It only confirmed what I already knew: truth makes liars desperate. David positioned himself near the door, his tall figure blocking the entrance like a soldier guarding his post. His voice was low but firm. "Mom, they're not getting in here. Not while I'm alive." I looked at my younger son. the one people always underestimated because of his quiet demeanor, and saw a strength in him that mirrored the fire I once had in my youth. It made me ache with both pride and sorrow. I had always thought Samuel was the strong one, but it was David, with his silent watchfulness, who had seen what none of us wanted to admit. Dr. Milton returned with 2 security guards, their uniforms crisp, their faces grim with duty. He whispered quickly, "Police are on their way. We've reported the tampered medications, and the lab results are locked in the system. No one can alter them now. But until law enforcement arrives, we must keep things under control." His eyes flicked toward Leah, then back at me. "Stay calm. You and your granddaughter are safe here, safe." The word almost made me laugh, bitter and hollow. I had lived 82 years, and I knew safety was never a guarantee. Safety was a fragile illusion that could be shattered in an instant, especially when deceit had already slithered its way into the heart of a family. Still, I nodded, because I needed Leah to hear that word, to believe it, even if I could not. Suddenly, the door banged. Denise's face appeared in the narrow glass window, her eyes wide, wild, unrecognizable. Gone was the charming smile she used to lure us all in. Gone was the mask of concern and devotion. What stared back at us through that glass was desperation, pure and raw, the kind that makes people dangerous. Her lips moved furiously, but the glass muted her words. I could still read them clearly. "You ruined everything." Leah whimpered, pressing closer to me. I stroked her hair, whispering softly, "Don't be afraid, my love. Lies always collapse, always." My words were steady, but inside my chest, my heart pounded like a drum. I had faced hardship all my life, poverty, widowhood, raising children on my own, but nothing compared to this moment, when my son's life teetered on the edge, and the truth itself was under attack. As the minutes stretched like hours, I thought back to a night years ago when Samuel was barely 12. He had come home from school bruised, his lips split, his knuckles raw. I had scolded him at first, fearing he had picked a fight. But he looked me in the eye and said, "Mama, they were bullying David. I couldn't let them." That was the boy I raised. Strong in body, but stronger in heart, always ready to sacrifice for others. And now he was the one who needed saving, not from strangers, but from the woman who shared his bed. The injustice of it made my blood boil, and for the first time in weeks, I felt strength surge back into my weary bones. The wail of sirens in the distance broke the tension like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Denise's voice faltered in the hallway, her protests suddenly weaker, more frantic. The security guard stepped into position, and Dr. Milton gave a small nod as if to say, "Hold on just a little longer." Leah lifted her head, her eyes round and glistening. "Grandma," she whispered, "will they believe us?" I pressed my lips to her forehead and whispered back, "They will, child. Because the truth doesn't need to shout, it stands even when everything else falls." The door burst open, not with violence, but with authority. 2 police officers entered, their presence commanding silence. One of them held a clipboard, the other a stern gaze that swept the room. Behind them, Denise's protests turned to shrieks, then sobs, her mask crumbling into pieces, right there in the sterile corridor. I watched through the open door, as the officer spoke firmly, as her parents tried to shield her, as she shook her head wildly, insisting she was innocent. But the evidence was already stronger than her cries. Leah's recording, the toxicology report, the pills David had found. The puzzle was complete, and the picture it painted was undeniable. And yet, even as relief washed over me, a new fear began to grow. Because if Denise had been capable of such betrayal, if she had risked everything for some secret purpose we still did not fully understand, then the question remained, what was she after, and how deep did this darkness go? The officers moved quickly, their voices firm and controlled, as they informed Denise she was being taken into custody for questioning. Her screams echoed down the hallway, shrill and desperate, a sound that would have broken me months ago, when I still believed her smile and let her words sink into my heart like poison disguised as honey. But now I felt no pity, only a hollow ache that the mother of my grandchildren had turned into such a monster. Leah buried her face against my chest, but I gently tilted her chin up. Don't hide, my love. Look, remember this moment. This is what happens when lies unravel. She blinked back tears, nodding, and clung tighter to my hand. David exhaled deeply, running a hand over his face, as if to wipe away years of frustration. Finally, he muttered, finally someone sees what she's been doing. His voice carried both relief and rage. The kind of rage that comes from watching a loved one suffer while powerless to stop it. He looked at me then, his eyes wet. Mom, I'm sorry. I should have pushed harder, should have made you listen sooner. I shook my head slowly, reaching out to touch his arm. No, son. You spoke, and I failed to hear. But we hear each other now, and that is what matters. When the hallway quieted, the police gone with Denise in their custody, silence settled over the ward. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was heavy, full of unanswered questions. Samuel was still lying in another room, and though the poison had been stopped, the damage remained. Dr. Milton came back once more, his eyes tired, his file thicker than before. He pulled a chair beside my bed, and looked at me with the gravity of a man who had seen too many families torn apart. Mrs. Harris, he began gently, we've stabilized your son for now. But he is very weak, his liver is failing, and though we can treat the poisoning, much of the damage cannot be reversed. Without a transplant, he may not survive long. The words sank into me like stones dropped into deep water. After everything, after all the revelations, after Denise's deceit had been dragged into the light, the cruel truth remained. My son still needed me, still needed my body to carry him forward. But now the choice felt different. It was no longer forced, no longer demanded by manipulation. It was my decision, mine alone. And yet, fear gripped me. I was 82 years old. My body was frail, my bones ached every morning. My breath was short when I walked across a room. Could I even survive such a surgery? And if I didn't, what would become of Leah? What would become of David, left to carry the burden of 2 generations alone? David must have seen the turmoil in my eyes because he leaned forward, his voice low, steady. Mom, don't decide tonight, please. You've been pushed and cornered for too long. Rest. Think. We'll find another way if we have to. You've given enough already. His words were kind, but they cut into me because I knew in my heart what he refused to say. Time was not our ally. Samuel did not have weeks or months. He had days, maybe hours. Leah looked up at me then, her eyes wide and filled with the innocence only children possess, but also with wisdom far beyond her years. Grandma, she whispered, Daddy always said you were the strongest person he knew. He said you never let anything stop you. Her little fingers squeezed mine. I know you'll do what's right. Her faith in me was both a comfort and a weight, heavier than any I had carried before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the hospital bed, staring at the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock that seemed to measure not time, but the beats left in my son's life. I thought of Walter, my husband, sitting in his chair at home, his eyes empty, his body trapped in silence. Would he have told me to sacrifice? Would he have begged me to live for the children who still needed me? Or would he have reminded me of the vow I once made when Samuel was born, cradling that tiny infant in my tired arms, whispering that I would protect him no matter the cost? Memories poured into me, uninvited but relentless. Samuel as a toddler, toddling across the kitchen floor with a wooden spoon in his hand. Samuel at 16, proudly showing me the license he had earned, telling me he could now take me anywhere I wanted. Samuel at 30, laughing as he lifted Leah high into the air, spinning her around until her giggles filled the backyard. Every image carved deeper into my heart, reminding me that this was not just a sick man in a hospital bed. This was my boy, my flesh, my firstborn, the one who had promised me once, Mama, when I get older, I'll build you a house so you'll never have to work again. He hadn't built me a house, but he had given me years of laughter, and that was enough. The truth was sharp and cruel. I might be the only chance he had left. But was my life mine to give? Or did it belong to Leah, to David, to the family that would remain if I were gone? I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, whispering into the darkness, Lord, guide me. Tell me what to do. Because I am so tired, and I cannot see the path. And in that quiet moment, as the night wrapped itself around me, I felt the weight of choice pressing harder than ever before. Morning came like a slow awakening from a nightmare, pale sunlight creeping through the blinds, slicing the dim hospital room into bars of golden shadow. I sat upright, stiff from a night of no sleep, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Leah had curled up in a chair, and finally drifted into a deep, exhausted slumber, her head tilted to one side. The recorder now silent on her lap. David had left before dawn to check on Walter and to gather some papers from home, but not before pressing a kiss to my forehead and whispering, "Stay strong, Mom, I'll be back before lunch." His words hung in the air long after he left, a lifeline in an ocean of uncertainty. I rose from the bed slowly, feeling the ache of my 82 years in every joint, and walked to the window. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had changed, cars rushing, people hurrying, the world continuing its endless rhythm. Yet here inside this room, time felt suspended, every second a heavy stone in my chest. I thought of Samuel lying 2 doors down, his body a battlefield between poison and survival. And I thought of the promise I had whispered to him as a newborn, that I would always protect him. For weeks I had been manipulated, cornered, pushed toward a decision without my consent. But now the decision was mine. And that made it no easier. Dr. Milton entered quietly, carrying a small tray with a mug of tea. He set it down gently on the bedside table and pulled up a chair, his silver glasses reflecting the thin morning light. "Mrs. Harris," he said softly, "Samuel made it through the night. His vitals have stabilized somewhat now that the toxins are no longer being administered. But his liver remains critically damaged. Without a transplant, his chances are still low." His voice held both hope and warning, like a man offering a candle in a long tunnel, but cautioning that the flame could go out at any moment. I wrapped my hands around the mug of tea, letting its warmth seep into my cold fingers. "If I give him my liver," I said slowly, "what are my chances?" Dr. Milton hesitated, the weight of honesty heavy on his tongue. "At your age, the surgery would be extremely risky. You could survive, but the odds are not in your favor. It could cost you your life." His words were steady, clinical, but I heard the unspoken plea beneath them. "Think of yourself." I stared at the tea, at the swirling steam rising into the cool air. In it I saw every path my life had taken, every sacrifice I had made, every moment where I had chosen others over myself. But this choice was not just mine. It belonged to the family who would remain. To Leah, who had already lost so much of her childhood to the shadows of deceit, to David, who had quietly held us together without complaint. If I died on the operating table, they would be left alone, 2 souls adrift in the aftermath of betrayal. Leah stirred, rubbing her eyes, her small voice breaking the silence. "Grandma," she murmured. "Did Daddy wake up?" I turned to her, my heart aching at the sight of her messy hair, her sleep-creased cheeks. "He's still resting, sweetheart," I said softly. "But he's fighting." She climbed off the chair and came to me, pressing her warm cheek against my side. "Are you going to save him?" she asked, her voice so small, so trusting. I bent down and kissed the top of her head. "I'm going to do what's right," I whispered. "Even if it's hard." Dr. Milton cleared his throat gently. "We can begin preparations if you decide to go forward. But I won't pressure you. This has to be your choice." He rose, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder before leaving the room, the door closing softly behind him. The quiet returned, heavy and unyielding. I walked back to the bed and sat down, pulling Leah into my lap. We sat there in silence, the steady beep of monitors from the hallway, a distant rhythm, like a heartbeat reminding me that time was slipping away. I thought of Walter at home, silent and frail, unaware of the storm swirling around his family. I thought of Samuel as a boy, bringing me wildflowers he'd picked from cracks in the sidewalk, his smile wide and pure. And I thought of the vow I had made to myself as a young mother in a cramped kitchen in Detroit. That I would protect my children from the world, even if it cost me everything. Yet this was different. This was not about fending off hunger or shielding them from cold winters. This was about life and death, about choosing between my own survival and my son's. And for the first time in my life, I truly didn't know what to do. My hands shook as I smoothed Leah's hair, my tears falling silently into her curls. Lord, I whispered into the stillness, if you're listening, show me the path. Because I'm so tired, and I'm so afraid of choosing wrong. Leah looked up at me then, her eyes clear and steady, and said something that pierced straight through my heart. Grandma, Daddy always said you were the bravest person he knew. Maybe being brave doesn't mean not being scared. Maybe it means doing what you think is right even when you're scared. Her words, simple and soft, settled in my chest like a seed planted in soil, long barren. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and felt something shift inside me. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew this: whatever I chose, it would be my choice, made in truth and not in fear, and that alone gave me strength. The decision weighed on me like a stone pressing into my chest, as the hours stretched into afternoon. Nurses moved in and out of Samuel's room, their faces careful masks of professionalism. But I could see the truth in their eyes. Time was running out. I sat by the window of my own room, Leah perched beside me, her small hand tucked inside mine. The world outside looked so ordinary: cars honking, children walking home from school with backpacks swinging, life moving as if nothing in the universe had shifted. But inside my heart, everything was breaking. David returned just before midday, carrying a small paper bag of food I couldn't eat, and an envelope of papers from the house. His eyes were tired, his shirt wrinkled, but his presence filled the room with a steadiness I clung to. He sat across from me, his hands folded, his gaze fixed. "Mom," he began, "I know you're thinking of doing it. Giving Samuel part of your liver. I can see it in your face. But you need to think of Leah, of me, of Dad. You've carried this family on your back for 82 years. You can't give the last of yourself away." His voice cracked, the weight of emotion finally seeping through. "If you die on that table, what happens to us?" His words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I had spent my whole life giving my time, my strength, my body. Was there anything left to give? And if I gave it, would it matter? I looked at David, my steady, quiet boy who had grown into a man of unshakable loyalty, and my heart swelled with love and sorrow. "Son," I said softly, "you know I would give everything for both of you, for all of you, but I can't stand by and watch Samuel fade, not when I have the power to help him. He is my child." That bond doesn't weaken with age, it only deepens. David shook his head, his eyes brimming. "And what about Leah? What about me? Do we not need you, to—" His words broke something inside me, because they were not selfish, they were desperate. The cry of a man who had already carried too much. Leah leaned against me, listening quietly, her small voice finally whispering, "Grandma, I don't want you to die, but I don't want Daddy to die either." Her words were like a blade twisting inside me, because they revealed the heart of it all. There was no easy choice, no path that spared everyone. Dr. Milton entered once more, his expression heavy. "Mrs. Harris," he said gently, "Samuel's condition is declining. We can keep him stable for now, but without intervention, he won't last much longer. If you choose the transplant, we need to begin preparations soon." His words left no room for denial. It was now or never. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He placed a hand on my shoulder before leaving, the weight of his touch grounding me in the moment. The room fell silent again, broken only by the hum of machines and the faint sound of hospital shoes squeaking on tile floors outside. I turned to Leah and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead. "Sweetheart," I whispered, "sometimes in life we're given choices that don't feel like choices at all. But we still have to make them. We still have to walk the path, even if it's hard." She looked up at me, her eyes shimmering. "Are you going to do it, Grandma?" I pulled her close, pressing my lips to her hair. I don't know yet, but I promise you this. Whatever happens, I will not let this family fall apart. Not while I still breathe. As evening settled, shadows lengthened across the walls, and my mind drifted to memories of my own mother, a woman as strong as iron and as gentle as spring rain. I remembered her hands wrinkled, calloused, yet steady as, she told me once, "Margaret, the measure of a mother's love is not what she keeps, but what she gives." I had lived my whole life by those words, and now they echoed louder than ever, a refrain I could not ignore. Samuel's laugh, Samuel's cries as a baby, Samuel's promise to build me a house, all of it flooded back, leaving me breathless with longing. And as I sat there, holding Leah close, watching David pace the room with his jaw clenched tight, I realized the truth. I had already made my decision. It wasn't about duty, not anymore. It was about love, fierce and unyielding, the kind of love that could not be silenced by fear. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and felt the weight of my choice settle into my bones. Whatever tomorrow brought, I would walk into it with my head high, not as a woman forced, but as a mother choosing freely. Night folded into dawn again before I spoke the words out loud. I told Dr. Milton I would sign. My hands did not tremble. My voice did not break. I had carried children in these arms, buried dreams in these hands, pushed wheelchairs and bread carts with these fingers. And if this was the last thing they would do, then let it be done with purpose. Leah pressed her cheek into my side and whispered that she loved me, and David stood very still, as if any movement might shatter the thin shell of courage holding us together. Papers appeared, consent lines in sharp black, and I wrote my name the way my mother taught me, each letter upright, refusing to bow. They began to prepare to rooms, one for me, one for Samuel, lights bright, staff moving with the quiet, choreographed urgency of people who carry life between their palms. I closed my eyes and pictured the small wooden truck Walter carved for our boy all those years ago. The tiny wheels that never squeaked, the way Samuel had pushed it across the floor as if he already knew roads were waiting for him. Then the door swung open, and a coordinator from Transplant Services hurried in, breath short, clipboard hugged to his chest. He spoke low to Dr. Milton first, and I watched hope flare and then steady across the doctor's face like a flame taking hold. He turned to me, and his voice, careful and restrained, could not hide the tremor beneath. A compatible donor liver had become available, partial, viable. A critical match flagged through an emergency network the moment the hospital filed the poisoning report. The organ was already en route. If the evaluation held, Samuel could receive it within hours. My consent remained a safety line, but the tide had shifted. I felt the room tilt. I felt my heart try to run and kneel at the same time. I asked only one question: whether the donor's family had agreed knowingly, freely, and, when Dr. Milton said yes, I pressed my palm to the cool metal rail and let silent gratitude wash through me until it became steadiness again. Everything after that moved like a river in flood. Nurses gathered labs. Anesthetists checked lines. Surgeons mapped the plan with swift, clean phrases. David kissed my forehead and then followed the team toward Samuel's room. His shoulders squared, his chin up, a quiet sentinel walking beside a gurney. Leah squeezed my fingers and whispered that she would wait with me, that she would count the minutes because counting made time behave. I told her to count breaths instead, slow and deep, the way I had taught her to calm thunder out of her bones. Somewhere down the hall, wheels rattled, a door sealed, and the red light above an operating theater blinked to life. I sat very still and listened for something no ears can catch, the moment when a body decides to keep living. Hours lengthened, and the corridor learned our prayers by heart. A nurse brought me tea that tasted of mint and warmth. A chaplain paused to rest a palm over my knuckles without asking questions. A custodian swept the same square of tile twice just to stay near. And I thought of David in his work shoes. How care sometimes wears a uniform people look through. Police returned with updates. I barely absorbed. Evidence logged. Statements taken. Denise transferred. Charges pending. Words that would matter tomorrow, but not more than the steady metronome of the clock tonight. When the doors finally opened, Dr. Milton's eyes found mine first. He did not need to speak, because his shoulders were lower, and his breath came easy. But he spoke anyway, each sentence like rain after fire. The graft had taken flow, was good. Samuel was stable. We would still walk the narrow bridge of recovery, rejection watched for, infection guarded against, but the first hardest crossing was behind us. I laid my forehead on the back of my own hand and let the tears come, not loud, not wild, just grateful, clean, old as a psalm. They let me see him when the machines settled into their humming song. Tubes, monitors, a forest of numbers where a face should be, but beneath the tape and the dressings, I knew that mouth, that brow, the faint notch on his ear from a childhood fall we once soothed with peppermint and song. I told him Leah had been a warrior and David AWOL, and that I had almost given what was left of me. But an unseen family gave first, and one day we would speak their surname in our kitchen with the reverence we reserve for bread. I promised him no more secrets would live under our roof, that medicine would be counted, and trust would be earned, and doors would stay open even when we were tired. I told him that somewhere a light had gone out so his could burn on, and that we would never waste what had been given. Weeks later, when he sat up for the first time and asked for water with a voice that sounded like gravel warming in sun, Leah brought the recorder to his bed and pressed play, not the evidence, but a new message she had made, 11 years brave. Daddy, you're safe now. Grandma says truth walks slowly, but it never loses its way. David stood in the doorway with a bouquet of wildflowers he pretended he hadn't picked from the hospital landscaping, and we laughed until a nurse warned us not to shake the lines. In the quiet that followed, I looked at my children and understood that surviving had a flavor of its own, salt and mint, and the iron taste of endurance, and that, though our house would hold scars, it would also hold mornings. Now I sit at my kitchen table, sunlight on the wood like honey, and speak to you with the steadiness of someone who has stood in the bright mouth of fear and walked back carrying names. If you stayed with me to the end, I want you here, close, not as strangers but as a circle. Subscribe and come into this family we are building, where stories are not just told but held. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me the moment that made your chest rise. Tell me what you learned and what you will not forget. Share your own story of the night. Truth arrived late, but still in time, of the day you chose courage with your knees shaking, of the person who stood in a doorway and would not let harm pass. Leave your words in the comments, so our community can answer back with theirs. And if this story gave you breath when you needed it, pass it on. We will be here next time, lights warm, chairs pulled close, making room for what is hard and for what heals.